Been interested in punk music, and I used to live in the East Village in New York, and I've always loved Blondie. And so I knew I was interested in interviews and kind of the power dynamics that happen there. And I just started watching some old interviews with Debbie Harry, and that is what gave me the idea for the short, which is called Deborah Harry Does Not Like Interviews.
You know, I noticed in some of the interviews, they were like people that I knew. There was one guy, I think he had something to do with the Kennedys.
Yeah.
He was a press secretary or something, and he was interviewing her.
Mm-hmm.
So she must have been fairly popular at that time. Like, what are we talking about, 60s, 70s?
Yes, so in the late 70s, Blondie was one of the first punk bands to kind of break through in the United States, but also in places like England and down in Australia. And so she was very much like the first person who took the blonde bombshell image and brought it into rock and roll.
I noticed, too, that she seemed to be very popular in England.
Yes.
When they interviewed her, they knew her like almost personally, and they were pleased to chat with her. And was that the case in most of the British Isles with her? You know? With
her, yes. At least in England, I don't know about some of the other places, but the band certainly went there. They toured and played there, and the albums were released there. And in fact, the documentary covers a little bit of this. One of her releases in England was kind of a scandal because the visuals for the album art was done by H.R. Giger, and there were kind of like metal rods in the image on the album going through Deborah Harry's head. And so in England at the time, they didn't want to have the album art up as promotional because they thought it was offensive and kind of scary.
Yeah, I would think so, because people were scared of it anyway.
Yes, I mean anything having to do with punk rock and Debbie, people were a little apprehensive.
Now, what was your objective with this particular piece?
Well, with this particular piece, I noticed in the interviews, as I think a viewer will, that there was a very specific way that Debbie was treated. She was a bit underestimated. Probably because she was a woman, probably because she was a very attractive woman, and instead of wanting to talk about her art often, they wanted to talk about her image, the way she looked, and just, underestimated what she had to bring to the table as a musician, as an artist, and as a person who was growing and developing as a musician.
So the assumption, or they acted like the assumption on their part was she's just a shallow little thing, and she sings, and she sells records, but there's nobody home.
That wasn't my assumption, but I think that a lot of the people that did interview
That's what
her,
I mean.
yes,
They were coming from that assumption.
Yes, they kind of assumed that there wasn't much there. There wasn't much behind the pretty face. And that's another thing I think you will see in the documentary is that the way that Debbie responds often is very clever and thoughtful. And kind of revealing in terms of the number of years that she had to deal with this treatment and the way she kind of changed her strategy as time went along.
Now, the documentary was only about 17 minutes long.
Correct.
So that was your limitation in getting your main point across.
Yes.
So, what do you hope for people to get out of this that come to see it?
I would like for them to learn a little bit more about Deborah Harry, beyond just the primary image we have of her. I think that, in the past years and years ago, we could never see all of these interviews at once and kind of see the way that she has grown and changed over the years. And I think that it will teach them a little bit about perhaps, sexism in the late 70s and 80s and even into the 90s and maybe even today. There's a bit, without giving too much away, there is a bit in the end about the documentary and the lyrics of a song where she talks about, looking forward to the 21st century, which is going to be better for women like her, and it kind of leaves us all to answer, has it been?
I'm starting to get a little chill listening to you because I can see now, consciousness-wise, that people that do interviews now are very careful. I mean, it's not just a talent funnel, but there's somebody behind that.
Yes.
And
I think,
person and they,
Yeah, I think we're all maybe more media savvy now than we've ever been. And when you think about like social media and influencers, we're very conscious of the image that we're projecting. And so that can make it can be difficult to have like genuine interactions and conversations in interviews too. And I think you'll see that in the film as well, that initially Debbie was very forthcoming and maybe even a little naive, but extremely genuine.
And she was almost one of a kind too. I mean, there wasn't that many talents who were going on TV and being interviewed, especially in the pop culture.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about Debbie, just when she happened to be born and to become a big rock and roll star, is that it also kind of tracks our media trends. And when we started doing interviews with musicians and when we started expecting musicians to do lots of interviews for lots of media over and over again,
Now, they got a lot of shorts on today here at the Maryland Film Festival.
Yes.
And they have the same limits of view. They got a short period of time to make a point or two about their film. And have you seen any of them?
I haven't seen any of the other shorts that I'm programmed with, but I'm really excited that this short, the Deborah Harry short, is programmed in this shorts block. The shorts block is called Unorthodox, so they are all documentary-related short films, but what they attempt to do is kind of take a different angle or perspective on documentary and maybe bring in elements of other genre films or styles or ways of telling documentary stories that we're not used to seeing.
I noticed in Deborah's bio that she did a movie here in Baltimore with John Waters. And what was it called?
It was called Hairspray. Yeah, which has been such a pop culture phenomenon in its own right because of the movie, which Debbie was in with John, the original, in the very late 80s, and then obviously was brought back as another movie musical with Ricky Lake, and then I believe a Broadway musical as well. So that film and those characters have been a part of our culture for the past 30 years.
Well, John's been here, he's been in and out, so he might show up today, John Waters.
John is one of my favorite people, and because I live in Boston right now, my husband and I, we often go vacation in Provincetown, so we see John there all the time.
P-Town man.
Yeah.
P-Town man,
Yeah, he is. And so it's exciting to also kind of be here in his hometown, showing this short.
Now, what's next for you, Meghan?
What's next? Well, I'm working on another short and a feature or a longer piece. In the short, I'm examining, again, kind of media attitudes, but towards a different topic. It's going to be about kind of like capitalism and millennials, and the way that we kind of gear children for the future. and how that's changed over the past, 30, 40 years. The longer, bigger piece is going to be about the East Village in New York, exploring the architecture. The second piece is about the East Village. It's going to be about the extended history of that neighborhood.
And you grew up there?
I didn't grow up there, but my grandmother is a native New Yorker, and she's one of the most important people in my life, so I feel very close to New York in a lot of ways. And I really loved living in the East Village, and being there made me think about how things came to be the way that they are right now. Because there's quite a dramatic history of that neighborhood, whether we're talking about squatters or musicians or poets, and it's had an enormous...
The Beat Gang was here years ago.
Yes, and the Beats, who were over in kind of Greenwich Village and then started to drift into the East Village. And Amiri Baraka, who was originally Leroy Jones, was called the king of the East Village for the period of time that he lived there. So a lot of amazing people have come through, and it's a history of our culture that I want us all to share and know more about.
So anything else?
I think that's good for me. I'm really excited to be here and to screen my short, but at the same time I'm really excited to see all the other work that people have brought here, and it's going to be exciting, and it's a great community, artistic community here in Baltimore.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
It was nice to meet you.
Best of luck with your film entitled
Deborah Harry Does Not Like Interviews.
All right. Best to you and Deborah.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.